our next item is the draft sports investment plan, which we have on a page. Now I know there is the potential, I'm chairing this with an iron fist, we are 1 minute behind schedule according to my scheduler here. We have 5 minutes for this because this is approving this to go out to the community, so we'll take it as read. I'm going to ask Kat and team to just give us the condensed version and hopefully we'll be ready to send it out into the real world. Thanks, Kat. Paul, Mace. Paul.
Very quick introduction. So we started off on this process 2016 with a discussion document. We've been out to local boards and to the sector, and there's generally strong support for it. We've also had the support of a political working group over the last couple of months to just refine some of the documentation in and around it. And as you say, let's take the report as read. We'll answer questions.
Fantastic. And can I just acknowledge the work that's happened in this area? I talked with Mace and Paul and I went and talked to the sports, gathered sports sector whenever it was, Friday.
Tuesday.
And the high trust environment in which we're operating now is quite a different place than we were a couple of years ago, and it's thanks to the amazing work that's been done by the team. So, a couple of questions, burning questions. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. Just one question. Happy with the plan, happy for it to go to consultation. I'm interested though in the emphasis to get to support communities of greatest need. We know where Māori and Pasifika are, Pasifika most. I'm just wondering if you have a plan to ensure that the consultation that comes back will be with either groups that deal with those communities with greatest need, or individuals, just making sure that we get their feedback.
Through the Chair, so we're looking at quite a varied sort of consultation mechanism. Certainly targeting Pasifika is very important. You see that there's a target population group within this, and what we want to do is make sure that we get to the communities of interest and hear directly from them through that consultation.
So there's a planned way to do it. Cool. Yes. Thanks, Chair.
Very important. Councillor Clow.
I'm just surprised badminton's not there.
What's badminton?
I say that genuinely.
Huh.
I mean, I know in my ward we've got quite a few factories that Chinese trusts, hire out, and I know of obviously Trust Stadium. There's all sorts of places around. But I'm surprised badminton is not ranked there, and Wakarama would have more participants than badminton.
So through the Chair, in terms of this, what we tried to do is pick up on Auckland Council's investment, and we look at badminton. There's quite a lot of private provision, so Asian communities are often providing their own facilities for badminton. But certainly in terms of future projections of participation, badminton is certainly a growing sport, table tennis, basketball. Those are the sports that are really on the up, sports that require indoor court facilities. And in some ways, much of our investment is in the past in terms of delivering lots of sports fields where there's changing participation rates between population groups.
Sorry, follow-up question. Are there any other
14
sports where there appears to be a lot of private investment, or as compared to council investment? And I suppose I would ask, is that fair? That we are effectively taking advantage of, the private.
So through the Chair, there's probably a couple. I think gymnastics is predominantly private provision. Some of the indoor court facilities, there's a little bit of a mixture of public and private. And I suppose the question in terms of the fairness, what we're really trying to do through this plan is direct investment to where the participants are and maybe just rebalance a little bit of the investment. So it is much more equitable. Okay.
And there is crossover with the next item, looking at the facilities.
Yeah.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What would be the cost of the lead relationship brokers to implement the policy?
Through the Chair, I think that's the next item.
Yeah, but it's part of
There is crossover. I think with this one, if we get comfortable with the fact that we can go out to the community and talk about this, I think we might pick up some of the gaps in the conversation as part of the facilities discussion. So if you can hold that question. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just got a question, and I'm sure it's a question I've asked you before, but I'll ask it again, probably at a workshop. And that is, obviously you've got a bit of a snapshot here. You mentioned 14 codes. Does that mean that this presentation across basketball, gymnastics and the like applies to 14, not just the ones that are here?
So through the chair, what we've done in the snapshot is just a couple of the sports. So what we've committed to was to providing it across those other, the missing ones.
So that's
we have
happening?
it for all the 14. Yes,
Okay,
that's
and I think the other question I was going to ask was really the one that Councillor Clow has raised, and that is that there are other sports or codes that have got large numbers. They may not necessarily be reflected adequately in council investment, but is it a big exercise picking up on those to add them to this mix, and can we make this a bit more of a dynamic process in that respect?
So through the chair, this was quite a complex piece of work. So we engaged PwC in the process, largely because they have a forensic accounting branch. So they went through some of our accounts to try and nail down the investment. And it really just does concentrate on that period 2011 to 17. So it is a retrospective bit of a look, and there was quite a lot of work for them to try and go through, which was a reasonably substantial amount of investment. I think it was over $500 million in total. I think they have quite a degree of accuracy, around about 80% of the data, but you'll notice on the flip side that there's a number of limitations and caveats to what they presented here as well.
Okay.
So really we see it as being a little bit of a snapshot. It provides us with another piece of evidence to consider.
Then just a suggestion, Madam Chair, by all means we can engage PwC, but there are also a number of codes here, some of them aren't here, that have got their act together. And would I suggest be able to turn up numbers in terms of council investment, some of them relatively quickly. So my view is that we could have more population at little, if any, cost as far as council is concerned. Some of those codes have got their act together, they're operating collaboratively. I'm thinking, well, particularly around hockey. Obviously hockey's here, but there are others that have their act together as well. So I just tossed that in.
Yeah. No, thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Cooper.
Just a couple of questions. So in terms of when you look at, one of the things it says here, basically, equity is about ensure equity of outcomes across the population regardless of age, gender, ethnicity or socio-economic status or where people live. But if we say, for example, badminton, and just rely on a particular, for the most part, a large ethnic group to fund their own, because a huge amount of Asians play badminton. It's just how it is, because we've got one of the regional centres in my ward, and I know they fund an awful lot themselves. It's an indoor court, but we're saying that you know that's actually, we're sort of saying, well, you're a particular socio-economic status, you can afford it, you can do it. So that's not talking about what we're talking in here, and I'm just concerned when you look at the Asian population as going to increase to 31%, we're basically saying, well, a third of you can do it yourself. That's what I worry about. Yeah, that is unfair. And also, I do hope we can sort this rugby thing out, given that participation is going to really, really decrease, but the huge amount of money we put into it, that we can start to shift that to sports that people are wanting to do. And if you look at swimming, we do put a lot of money in, but it's getting bigger and bigger, and we are going to have to hugely put more money into swimming, but it's actually now kind of a user pays, whereas we don't, we make them pay to use facilities, whereas we don't make people pay to use the rugby field or the netball field, but they pay their association a fee. So there's a big shift here, and I'm not saying we shouldn't get people paying, but a bit of fairness. The other one is just in this, when I look at the language, sorry, which one is it? I think it's after this one, some of the language just around, I'm not quite understanding, limited budget which caters for spatial or code-specific needs or investment for particular interest groups. If we're going to put that out, it's really hard to understand. I'm struggling. Spatial or code-specific needs. I think we need to say, you know, we're not going to build stuff for you, or it's going to be limited money for us to build things for you, or give money to particular codes, because I just think some of the language is a bit tricky. This is reasonably okay for us, but
do we need just
if
a
you
little
just
bit
make
of
the
a last
public be
minute
able to
scan
understand
for
it?
real people
Because
language?
maybe the people that have got paid people in their code organisations,
Yeah.
or people that are maybe on the committee that are highly educated,
Yeah.
you know, they can sort it out, but I think it's hard for some other people.
Good point.
Anyway,
Can do that.
I'm just wondering if we can, if it's too late, probably too late to change some of the language.
So just, we can give it one more plain English check. I mean, we get so used to the language, we start to think it's normal.
I know,
So we will give it another check.
Standing in
That
the
does
shoes of
not
someone in
sound
Massey
plain
or
English, so we'll do that before it's
Glenfield.
released.
Thanks.
Right, and final question, councillor Philippina, or final
thank-
comment?
Thank you, Chair. Let's just, going on Councillor Walker's question around sports and other comments around participation. So on your presentation, the chart with the sports and why do we need a new plan, how do we engage with other codes, for example, touch? Because touch, as you know, and I've said this consistently over the last 8 years, has always been a growing sport amongst our Māori and Pacific. Still continues to grow. So how do we engage with that but get some true reflection around numbers, similar to what Councillor Cooper was talking about with badminton and everything else. So I think it's important that we do. And in that, Mason, I know you're going to reply to it, but in that also tag. That's another growing sport. And I know that rugby is mentioned here with league, but here's two sports that are working really separate. And you know, around Ngāti Otara Park and everything else, and the reason I mention that is because of the sports that go to that particular field. Kilikiti is one of the strongest one for us, and we have a committee there that gets through. So, you know, I sort of bring those to the table, Mace. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
So, Councillor
comment,
Philippina, through the chair, we do engage with the codes in a number of ways, both at the national sporting organisational level, regional sporting organisational level, and then down to the clubs as well. And separately, I think as Councillor Clow was pointing out, and Councillor Walker, there are a lot of self-motivated groups who we are now engaging directly with as well, particularly as we've got more maturity in our booking systems for whether it's an indoor facility or an open-air field facility. So we're getting a greater understanding of use and demand and need. But it is challenging, and particularly for those growth sports. So that's a continue, and that's what this plan's about, or the proposal's about, is actually getting a better engagement with all of those sports and codes.
It's just at a high level, I suppose, this document indicates to Aucklanders that need and demand keeps changing,
Yep.
which means our participation and partnerships with people need to change and be flexible to actually meet the needs of Aucklanders. And that is a hard message for some codes because, as you know, there is sometimes limited resources to go around, and it's constantly a balancing act between where participation is now and might be falling and where participation might be in the future. So this plan is meant to signal to everyone that actually we are going to have to continually assess things to see where we are and to see what changes we need to make, but we're trying to make it really clear how those decisions would be made, what the assessment criteria is and how that assessment criteria is weighted. So it's really open and transparent.
Yeah.
I think just to
Chair,
follow
just,
up, Madam Chair, it's just,
sorry.
it's, as well as investment, we're also making those decisions around allocation. So they're two different
Yeah.
lenses.
And comments later? Or-
No, I'm quite keen that we wrap this up.
Cool.
So, any more comments? If you've got a comment, make it now.
Oh, look, it's just that this going out is one of the key things that we need, especially in light of what Kataraina said. Because for many, many years, touch, tag, and other sports have been growing in participation, and some of them up to about 60-70%. And Auckland Council as a whole haven't addressed the issue, so that's why I'm supporting the fact that this plan needs to go out. If clubs have an issue with hey, the changing demographics, well then so be it. Let's have that conversation. That's all. It was just. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor
Yeah, yeah.
Filipina. That's the kaupapa of this
Yeah. Yeah.
piece
that's
of
it's
work,
good
which
coming
is
out.
critical. Member Brown.
Yep, thank you. Recognise that the report's like the last 6 years, so just on that, where's golf?
In a very happy place. So,
I love you.
I don't,
There's an equity question over rugby when you look at the graph, but I'll take that a step further and suggest to us all
yeah.
that if that was an equity question, I want to see golf on the graph. So that was the last 6 years. In terms of the next 6 years, around having the plan, so diamond sports, none more recent than the new Auckland Tuatara.
Yep.
So I don't see them, at least in our retrospective thinking, I absolutely want to see that in the next 6 years, because there is already a number of investments going in, as we're aware. So the fact that that didn't even make the last 6 year sort of summary has interested me, because I'd imagine the investment in diamond sports is actually quite significant. So that aside, I want to see golf, because that's a sport and that is taking up a lot of land for very few people. Kia ora.
Can we just touch on it? Oh, I think we just go yes.
So
We've got the information,
Yeah.
you've
I
had
think-
it was $3 billion, so we can
Yep.
take that on there.
yeah, and so just through the chair, in terms of, so this investment doesn't look at how we invest through land. This is just capex, opex. So that's why golf doesn't get picked up in this one. And just to note that we also have a separate golf facilities investment plan that will be coming to the committee in the new year.
It will. Okay. I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Oh, I've moved it. Councillor Filipina seconded.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought we'd done that. And there will be a lot of discussion when it comes back to us. Thank you,
Yes.
team, for the excellent work.